Hi, everybody. I'm Ria. I sit on the Steam business team. So all of those lovely tools that Alden and his coworkers are working on, we're sort of the team that interfaces with partners more directly. So when you guys are shipping your games, if you have technical questions, if something goes wrong with Steamworks, or if you have feature requests, our goal is sort of to make Steamworks both better for you guys and better for customers as well. So we can help connecting customers with your games. So that's kind of what the Steam business team does, and it's good to see you all. I think we still have some folks trickling in, but we have a Q&A session. If you'd like to ask any questions directly in chat, and of course we've also got chat if you have anything that you'd like to say, I guess, as we get started here.
It looks like we also have Diego joining us. He helped put this together. I believe he wanted to say a few words, so I think I have a button to allow him to show up here. Yes, I think that worked.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you, Diego? Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you for making this possible.
Yeah, thank you for helping us put this together and getting everybody invited. This looks like a great turnout.
Great. I can't see how many people are here. Can you maybe tell us the number?
We have 22 so far.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and it seems like people are still trickling in, so maybe we wait just another minute or two for people to get in and settled, and then we'll get rolling with the session. Did you also have a few words that you wanted to say to folks that are joining? Otherwise, no need if you don't have anything in particular you want to say.
Sure, yes, I'll just say a few things very quickly in Spanish. Bienvenidos todos, muchas gracias por venir, por acompañarnos. Estamos teniendo, como ya han dicho Alden y Ria, este pequeño evento para ustedes, para que puedan preguntar lo que gusten. Y por favor aprovechenlo porque esperamos que esto sea el primer evento de muchos como este. Así que nada, aprovechenlo. Gracias por venir.
All right. I guess with that, we'll get rolling. And let's see.
I guess, sorry, Diego, to put you on the spot again, but we're going to be talking only in English. Would it be helpful or useful if we pause in between questions if you want to translate, or should we just go and we can deal with the rest of it later?
No, that's okay. You can go ahead in English. I was just speaking in Spanish because it's easier for me.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, sorry to everyone that we're not bilingual, but looking forward to chatting with you all today.
All right, and with that, I think we'll get started with our session. So this is a pretty casual session. We'll spend the next hour going through. A few of you were able to submit questions ahead of time, so we'll be talking through that. We'll also start with kind of a general overview on how we work as a platform, and then we'll dig into your questions. And then as we go along, feel free to drop your questions into the question and answer, the Q&A feature that's built into Zoom here. And we'll try to address those as we go along, or as we wrap up a particular topic, and then we'll move on to a question. So yeah, don't hesitate to jump in and drop your questions in, and we'll try to answer them as best we can. Yeah, we did introductions, I think, before everybody had a chance to join. So I think we can just do that really quick. Again, my name is Alden Kroll. I'm a designer on the Steam team. So I work on the design of a number of the Steam features, both customer-facing store and community features, but as well as the backend Steamworks features and tools that you all use as you prepare your games for release. So I'm always curious to hear the questions that you all have, and I can talk pretty well to how a number of the features work, as I was very closely involved in them. Ria?
Yeah, and I'm Ria, who I sit on the Steam business team. So we're the team that interfaces the most directly with publishers and developers like all of you. And, you know, as Steam as a whole, and the Steam business group in particular, we're always looking to make the platform better for you guys, and also better for customers, because our big goal for Steam is, we want to help customers find great games. And the way to do that is, there are many different ways, but working with partners to make sure that you guys have everything you need to ship your games on Steam. Working on Steam as a platform to make sure that customers are able to find the games that they are looking for, and everything in between that might get in the way of someone finding that next really great game that they want to play. So yeah, that's kind of how we think about Steam in general. We put a lot of work into building long-term relationships with players. So we don't want to be just a place where you can buy the game. We want to be a place where you can learn more about the game, whether that's through the store page, a trailer, a screenshot, or if it's through reviews by other customers. And we really want to, we like to think of Steam as a place where people play their game, and they have all the features that they might want as part of that, whether that's achievements or the ability to play remotely with friends that are, not in the same area. These are all things that go into, I think, making Steam a better place for both customers and also for developers and publishers like you. That was a long thing. Anyways, that's kind of our ethos here and what we're trying to do with Steam.
Yeah, and so, along the way, we've built Steam into be this global platform, which really helps us better serve the goal of connecting you and your games with customers around the world that are going to be interested in the kinds of games that you have to make. So our approach to all of this is, building a platform where any game can come and be able to find and build an audience as a developer over the lifespan of your career, making multiple games, be able to help bring your customers from your first game to your second game, be able to let them know when you're making interesting stuff and when you have updates to your games. These are all features that are built into Steam and help build it out as a platform, hopefully as a place that can help you run your business and find your audience. We like to build Steam in a way that it operates a little bit differently maybe than some other platforms. If you're used to, say, making mobile games, for example, our platform works a little bit differently. We don't have specific editorial positions on Steam in order to get your game featured and surfaced to customers. Instead, we build that to be responsive to what customers are demonstrating interest in. We do have a few particular curated spots for our promotions, and we can get into details on that later, but by and large, the store is built around player preferences and what players are interested in. Ria, I think you're going to talk a little bit more about kind of how that works at a high level, at least, as well.
Yeah, we really find that Steam customers do a much better job of telling us what's popular than what we are playing ourselves. And so for that reason, the Steam homepage and all parts of Steam actually are personalized for each user, because someone who plays a lot of farm simulator games and puzzle games like me is not going to be interested in the same kind of games that someone who plays a lot of games like Call of Duty or Rust or shooter games like that. We're going to have very different interests, and so it's important for us as Steam to show you different things, because showing me a shooter game is going to do nothing, right? Like, that's just not the kind of game I'm interested in, and so my Steam homepage is going to look very different from Alden's. So the front page is going to be customized based on a bunch of things, including games that you've played or games that you've wish listed. If you're following any curators, you'll see what they think about various games. Games that your friends are playing or wish listed do have a higher chance of appearing, as well as, region by region is pretty different too. So if a gamer like me who is in Japan is looking at their Steam homepage, they're going to see different things than what I see, because something that's very popular in Japan right now might not be as popular in the US. And so Steam is always trying to make sure to show you things that you are interested in, whether that's things that you've shown interest in or people around you have shown interest in. We have a bunch of customization on that front. We actually have a YouTube video that goes super into detail on that homepage. I guess I can just drop that in chat now. although I hope you watch it later and not right now. We do talk about sort of what's popular, not how we determine what's popular and what's showing on the Steam homepage. And part of that too is we don't sell advertising. So you cannot come and say, hey, Steam, you know, I've got a game coming out in a month. I think it's going to be really great. Will you put me on the homepage for some amount of money? We don't do that. We let customer interest drive what is showing on the Steam homepage. So visibility on Steam is really driven by customer interest. And we think that's the best way to make sure that we're always showing the right games and the relevant games to customers. And I think that evens the playing field as well. So your game has just as much of a chance to appear on the homepage as a AAA studio. So we really value that kind of fairness. And that's sort of how the Steam homepage is organized.
Yeah, I see a couple of questions coming in from Hitoshi. Well, let's get to these in just a couple of minutes. We're going to start with a couple of questions that we had from all of you ahead of time, because I think we're going to kind of start with a super high level, how to even get on Steam, how to sign up, how to bring your game to Steam, and then we can get into some of these details as we go through this. So looking at some of the questions that were provided to us ahead of time that you all submitted, one of the questions is, you know, at the very basic, how do I get signed up onto Steam? Do I need a company to be able to distribute a game on Steam? The answer is no. You can sign up as a company, you can sign up as an individual. Either way works for us. You need to just fill out some digital paperwork that includes entering in your bank and tax information, so that we know how to pay you and what to withhold depending on your legal status of whether you're a person or a company. It may be worth consulting briefly with a local tax professional, as there may be some tax advantages to being registered as a company versus as an individual. That's going to depend on different countries and how your tax rules are set up there. So that may be a useful question either to ask of other developers that have gone through this before, or a local legal professional that can help answer that.
Yeah, and similar to that, the next question is obviously, okay, so now I'm signed up to be part of Steamworks. What do I need to do to publish my game on Steam? So when you sign up for Steam and you get started, we actually have a pretty nifty checklist that we require all games to have before we will publish the store page, and then another checklist for before we'll publish your game. So super high level, these are things that you would expect, you know, to publish a store page. You need to have some screenshots, you need to have a description of your game, you need to have some tags to tell us what kind of game it's going to be. And then for the build itself, build review, or, you know, when we're actually validating the game needs to run. We have some rules about what your game can include and what it can't include. But the big things is everything that you promised on the store page in your game. So if you say, hey, you know, my game has Steam achievements, we're going to block you from launching until you actually implement those Steam achievements in your game. Or you can just go back to your store page and say, never mind, I don't have Steam achievements. You can always do things after the fact. So once you pass review the first time, we're not going to be like, you know, we're not going to go back and re-review your page. So if there are changes that you need to make, you don't have to wait the 2 or 3 business days for us to approve whatever that change is on your page. 2 things to be aware of. 1, when you publish that store page, you can't immediately publish your game after. There is a 2-week waiting period between publishing the store page and then publishing your game. So that is one thing to be aware of.
Yeah, and it's also useful to think about that time period as a period of time to help build your audience and awareness that your game is coming as well. It's probably not a great idea, even if you could, to simply put up your game and launch it immediately. It's always helpful to spend some time making sure that some players know that your game exists and is coming. So whether that's participating in local game conferences or virtual events, or reaching out to live streamers, or figuring out where people hang out on the internet that play the kinds of games that you make. Those are all good things to keep in mind as you're working on Well, probably as you're still working on your game and thinking about what is the product of your game and how do you communicate that effectively to people that might be interested in what you're making. One of the related questions that came in through the Q&A here is from Hitoshi, who asks, in general, for new game developers, what would you say is a good time to have a Steam page? So I think what they're asking there is how far ahead maybe should you put up your store page before the release of your game? I think the answer to that is going to vary a lot. We see some developers have one up for a few weeks or a month. We see some developers that have one up for multiple months or even multiple years. We really think the right time to put up that store page for your product is when you're ready to start talking to customers about your game. You probably have some screenshots or maybe even a trailer that show what it's like to play your game, what your game looks like. You have a pretty good idea of what is going to be part of your game, what's the core gameplay, what are the features of your game. That's a good time to start putting up a store page and talking to customers about your game and getting them excited. So that store page will give customers a place to go and add the game to their wish list if they're excited about it. And then when you get to release day and hit the release button, they'll all get an email notification that says that game is now available. So the more time you give yourself to build up that audience and that anticipation, probably the better.
We do sometimes hear a rumor that's like, oh, there's a specific time that you should launch your Steam page because the Steam algorithm will punish you if your game is incoming soon for too long. That's not the case. The algorithms for various parts of the Steam store don't look at how long your game has been incoming soon. So we always recommend, when you're ready to tell the world about your game, that's when you should put that page up. There's no harm in putting it up many months, hopefully not years, but many months in advance of when you plan on launching, because as long as you have something that is compelling and interesting for customers to wish list, you kind of want to collect all of that interest in one place. So once you're ready to talk about it, that's probably when you should have a store page up.
Yeah, so there was a question submitted ahead of time that related to what we were talking about earlier, sort of the release process and preparing for release and going through a review process. As Ria touched on kind of the details a bit of how that review process goes, it's meant to be a fairly lightweight review process, not as complex as some certification processes on other platforms. And you're still free to update both your game and your store page after release as you need to, fix bugs, ship updates, things like that. We want to make sure that it's easy and flexible for you to be able to build your game and update your game in a way that makes sense for how you run your business. Related to that, there was a question, are there people who check the content of the game for a publication in the store, or is that automated, or how does that work? Those are actually people. We have a fairly sizable team that is checking every game as it's preparing for release, and they're installing the build and playing the game for a while to make sure that it is roughly matching what is described on the store page, and also doesn't contain malicious content or even if whether accidental or intentional, and make sure that it's basically as advertised on the store page. So those are real people installing the game and going through those processes. And then Ria, I think there was a related question of, how do we work as a business team and interacting with developers as they're preparing for release? Do we have assigned release managers, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess to start, no, we don't. Not every game on Steam has a release manager, which you guys may have guessed. And part of that too is, remember, we believe very strongly in our algorithm, and we believe that our algorithm is going to do a great job of promoting the game in the places where those customers are going to be. So even if a game is super popular, or even if a game is coming out from your latest AAA developer, we don't necessarily assign a person to work on the title. It's a lot of distributed work, right? So someone is going to go in and review your build and make sure that it matches what is on your store page. If you end up doing trading card or community items, someone else is going to make sure that the content that you're putting forward matches our guidelines and looks good. So there's a bunch of people that will touch your game throughout its life cycle on Steam. So yeah, there's not, you don't have to know a specific person, and your game doesn't have to be working with a specific person for it to do well on Steam. A lot of it is going to be pretty algorithmic. And finally, talk to us. Talk to us via tickets. And we use a ticketing system because it makes it a lot easier for us to route tickets to the right person. If Alden is, working on some kind of tool and, someone comes in with feedback about that thing that he's working on, for it to come to me is kind of useless, right? So what we do instead is we'll just send that off to Alden, so he has, that information on hand. And finally, we also do this because there is such a thing as inbox death, where you send in an email and we just don't see it for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. So again, tickets is the best way to talk to us and talk to the rest of the team here. And we highly recommend reaching out. You don't have to have a problem to come and talk to us. If you have a suggestion or if you're looking for advice, we're always happy to chat with you guys there as well.
From here, I think we're going to jump categories to sort of marketing, visibility. So there's a few questions that have come in through the Q&A, and then also one that was submitted ahead of time. So we'll try to talk through these questions all together. They're fairly related here. So one of the questions that was submitted ahead of time was, what is the best way to get the first sales on Steam? Some focus on having a large number of wish lists before launch, others invest in advertising, while others simply release the game. So I think we touched on some of these topics earlier, and I'll try to explain a little bit more about what we see and recommend. It depends a lot on the kind of game that you're building and who your audience is. Steam is one of the ways that customers can learn about new games and get excited about upcoming games. In fact, we have some events that are built around doing exactly that. And I think Riel will talk about that next. But people learn about video games all over the internet. So it can be useful to figure out who are the people that are going to be playing your game, who's the audience, what's that group of people, what are their interests, and where do they hang out and talk about those kinds of games? How can you engage with them in a way to let them know that your game exists, your game is coming, help maybe get their feedback, get them excited about the game. So it's useful to spend a little bit of time doing a little bit of research and figuring out what kind of online communities do those players hang out in, and how can you engage with them in those places. And so for some games, reaching out through live streamers is going to be a really effective way to get your game in front of people. But other people are making a kind of game that doesn't live stream very well. And so it might be a different approach to find tastemakers in other channels, different journalists or different people that might write reviews or have short Let's Play videos of other kinds about those games. So it's really useful to I guess, become kind of a student of the industry and learn about the different ways that other developers are finding success in building their audience, and just kind of figure out and try a few different things and see what customers are responding to in the different ways that you could, I guess, get players excited and aware that your game exists.
Yeah, and to tag on to what Alden was saying here, we had another question from Hitoshi asking, sort of in the same vein here, one struggle for developers is to how to gain visibility. And the question is there any way for game developers on Steam to expose their game to a possible audience, or is everything automated where Steam gets to decide, what games are showing where? And I will say that, most of Steam is going to be driven by what Steam thinks, is going to be relevant for that customer. However, there are a bunch of other things you can do. We have a curator system. If your game is a cozy game that involves dogs, I am pretty sure there is a curator there that specifically does cozy games for dogs. And you can reach out to them and give them access to your title, and they might write a review about your cozy game with dogs, and that will show up in their, and that will show up to anyone who follows that curator. So that's an example of, a thing that you can do to gain visibility with a specific audience on Steam. But in terms of, if you want to target specifically anyone who has played a looter shooter game in 2D in the last X months, no, we don't have a way for you to target those customers directly.
Yeah, I mean, targeting, it's useful just to think about at a philosophical level. There's some platforms where you can totally spend a bunch of ad money to target exactly those people and pay to have your game show up to those customers. We don't think that is the right way for us to run our platform, but we look at those same kind of mechanics and think, okay, if you were putting up and you have a certain kind of game, who would you want to be able to target with that? You would want it to show up to the kind of people that play that kind of game. And so we try to build Steam in a way that it just works that way. And there's a lot of different places where we recommend games to customers, but then there's also really deep exploration tools where customers will go and dive really deep into a genre, into subgenres, looking for the kinds of games that they're really interested in. So games can show up to customers in a variety of different ways. And we try to make Steam work in the ways that you would want your game to be able to show up to customers. The thing that is important is that, as Ria was mentioning, our algorithms feed basically on customer interest. And so when we see a lot of customers interested in a game, that gives our algorithms more confidence to show that game to more people. That there's something interesting happening in that game, players are excited about it, they're buying it, they're playing it. When our algorithms see a game where nobody is buying it, nobody's playing it, nobody's paying attention to it, then it's really hard for our algorithms to have confidence that there's a level of interest among customers. So it is really helpful for you as a game developer to also be building awareness among customers and building excitement ahead of time. As we've talked about, building kind of wish lists going into release means when you get to release day, all that many people that have wishlisted your game will get a notification that your game is now available. So those are useful things to keep in mind as you're preparing for release.
Yeah, and this actually flows right into two questions that were answered. So we'll sort of get both of those out together. We had an anonymous attendee ask, do wish lists and follows help increase a game store page visibility on the platform? And then we also had Diego asking, what are the best KPI stats that can help a developer to improve user engagement interest for the game or to appear more often on Steam front page? So both of those two things I think can be answered together, which is wish lists and follows absolutely help your game's visibility on the platform. And part of that is, when you launch your game on Steam, everyone who's wishlisted the game is going to get an email. If someone has followed your publisher or developer page, all of those people are going to get an email as well. And then that even flows through, after you launch your game. So wishlisters, if you put your game on discount for 20% or more, all of the wishlisters for your game are going to get an email. So in that way, one of the best KPIs to look at is wishlist, because that represents real customer interest in buying your game, maybe not today, but sometime in the future. Other things that we look at in terms of KPIs, obviously sales from both a unit perspective and a dollar amount is the strongest signal we can get from customers on whether or not they're interested in a game. I've heard some people think that, if I have a very short narrative game and my average playtime is only 28 minutes, is that going to negatively impact my game on Steam? And the answer is no. We don't think that that's a relevant KPI to really be basing off of, Otherwise, you can just have a developer and all of your beta testers leave the game on indefinitely. And then, wow, this game has 60 hours of medium playtime. That's not something that we find is a useful gauge of customer interest. So that's not something, for instance, that is a KPI that we look at. So I think if you put on your little Steam hat and you're like, what is a really good measure of whether or not a customer is interested in this game, that's going to be a KPI that's more relevant than stuff like medium playtime.
There was a question submitted ahead of time that I think would be good to touch on, which is there a number of questions about kind of playable demos and timing. When is the best time to do that? Ria, we have some special events that we run every year designed entirely for upcoming games with demos. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. The event that Alden is talking about is something that we run 3 times a year called Steam Next Fest. And it is specifically designed to give customers a chance to take a look at games that are coming up soon. We know that, it's hard for a game that is coming up soon to gain wish lists and some traction, especially if they don't have, a ton of marketing money or advertising dollars to do a lot of, the work that we were talking about off of Steam. So Next Fest is a way for you guys to get your demos for these upcoming games out in front of customers and live stream and have an opportunity to talk with your potential customer base. One of the only requirements for Next Fest is, there's 2. 1, your game has to be coming soon. It's not for games that are already out. And 2, you have to have a playable demo. And so we always get a bunch of questions in terms of, how long should my demo be? How long should, I leave that up on Steam? What kind of things should I have in my demo? And it's a hard question because everyone's demo is going to be different. But in general, 1, we think Next Fest is great. You should participate and you should have your demo up for the duration of the event. That's a requirement. If you want to leave your demo up for longer, either before or after the event, that's totally up to you. Personally, for me, I always love playing demos because it allows me to try the game before I am going to be more invested in it, whether that's wishlisting or buying the game. So if there's a reason for you to take your demo down, for instance, it shows a lot of gameplay and you don't want to show that much of it, or if you don't think, that it is a representative experience of your game eventually, then take it down. We don't have any requirements here other than it stay up for the duration of Next Fest, and I don't think we have any data to really show what the right timing is. Every game is going to be different, every demo is going to be different, so as long as that demo is a good representation of what the customer will get when they play your game, I say leave it up. If there's reasons to take it down, then take it down. And then actually the end of this question asked, would Steam punish visibility for rough early demos? No. For example, we actually have no way of knowing whether or not your demo is good. And the number of people who play your demo is not something that factors into the visibility of your base game. It will factor into your visibility in very small sections of Next Fest. But in general, if you put out a bad demo and you get a lot of feedback that says, hey, it's kind of buggy, it doesn't work well, that's not going to negatively impact your ability to appear anywhere on Steam. However, you should be careful about putting, subpar demos out there because someone who plays the game, who plays the demo and doesn't have a good time with it is not likely to come back and wishlist or buy that game. So be careful.
One of the questions that came in through the chat here has to do with pricing and how that's adjusted per country. So I'll talk for a minute about how pricing works on Steam. Ultimately, you are in control of the price of your game on Steam. Steam offers pricing to customers in 30 something different currencies. So we have built tools to help you figure out how to manage the price of your game in all those different currencies. And we have a set of recommendations for how the price of your game could be adjusted to those different currencies. So for example, if you come in and you set the price of your game to be $19.99 US, then Steam has some built-in recommendations to say, well, okay, in Europe, this should be that many euros, and in Russia, this should be that many rubles, and in China, this should be that many, etc. You can take those recommendations and use them, or you can enter your own different pricing for each of those currencies if you wish. So it's really just designed to be a helpful shortcut. So because it can be a daunting task to try to figure out how to adjust your price for 36 different currencies around the world. And we base those recommendations on not just a direct conversion of currency, but we also look at things like local living, standard of living and purchasing powers in those countries. So some countries for example, their standard of living and their purchasing power is much lower. And so the pricing in those countries tends to be much lower, which makes the game accessible to customers in those countries. And again, you can override it with your own pricing if you think you have some better data on how your game should be priced in particular countries or currencies.
All right, hopping back to the Steam algorithm again, Hitoshi asks, does posting Steam updates frequently on the Steam store page help your game with the algorithm? Not directly is going to be my answer. The algorithm is not looking at how often you post Steam updates. However, your customers will be aware of how often you are posting Steam updates. So I would say post an update when you have something to say. Oftentimes, if you've got patch notes or you've got upcoming content, that's important information for your customers to know, because they might want to play the game now that the patch is out, or they might want to, keep an eye on next week when the new thing is launching. So in that way, Steam updates are useful because they tell the audience, and they also tell potential customers that this game is still alive. You guys have probably seen a bunch of comments and reviews on Steam for games where they say, oh, this is a dead game. And that may not actually be true. The developer may be working on patches and updates and bug fixes, but it's hard for you to communicate that to the audience. And so that's why we built sort of the events and announcements tool, so you can keep your community updated on what's going on. Particularly for like live service games, it can, I think, worry some customers if they go to a store page and they see that the game hasn't been updated in a long time. That can sometimes be a negative thing for games, live service games. So that's an example of where, posting those updates semi-frequently is probably going to be a good thing overall.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that you can do to give customers an excuse to care about your game again. So imagine you're sometime after release of your game, and imagine if you're going to a store page and you're looking at purchasing different games, and one of them has a developer that's telling you all about new updates to their games or interesting things happening that they're seeing players encounter in the game, things like that, versus a game that has none of that chatter going on. You're probably going to be slightly more interested and engaged in the game where the developer is posting and sharing information and giving you more things to get excited about and care about. And it can be a really great way to re-engage your existing audience. So if you have a bunch of players and your game came out 6 months ago and you make an update to the game, posting that and making that clear through the Steam and events tools to cut to your existing customers can help give them an excuse to jump back into their game. And then all of their friends see them playing the game again. That gets their friends curious about the game, makes them slightly more likely to come and buy the game as well. So all of those things, the things that you do as a developer around your game, those are interesting to your customers and your potential customers. So it's important to think about sharing that and making that visible to your customers and giving them an excuse to get excited about your game again. What do we want to go here?
I think that actually goes really well into Paolo's question, which is, in an early phase of development, when a game is maybe still in early access, what factors should be taken care of or considered for the Steam page? So there are things that are required. So as mentioned, you're going to need trailers, you're going to need screenshots, you're going to need a description of the game. And then beyond that, what I always like to recommend is pull in a friend or a family member or someone you trust who doesn't know anything about your game, and set them down in front of your store page and ask them, can they figure out what kind of game it is? Can they figure out what kind of gameplay they can expect from the game? And ask them their opinion of the game, because they haven't seen what you're working on. So they're a perfect example of someone who's coming to your store page for the first time. And whatever their instant, reaction is going to be what a lot of people see when they visit your store page. So if they come to your game and they're like, oh, this is like a magical platforming game, and your game is not a magical platforming game, that's a great sign that you should do some work on your store page and make sure it's a good reflection of the kind of gameplay and the kind of game that someone can expect when they end up buying it. And then wish list was sort of added on to the end of the question. There's never a bad time to try and build wish lists. Like, it's always good to be working on that wish list number. But again, it's probably best to do that when you have something to show customers, whether that is a store page or whether that's a demo is going to be up to, you know, your individual game and what's going on there. But wish lists are always good.
There was a sort of related question also came in about visibility rounds on Steam and how those work. So visibility rounds are intended to be ways to amplify your game when you have a major update to the game. It's not intended to be used in any other way except when there is a major update to your game. And so by default, your game will have 5 visibility rounds. So you can trigger those when you have a major update to your game. And that allows your game to show, again, on the homepage of Steam to people that own your game and have wishlisted your game. So that is a way to, you know, help re-engage customers that play your game and are excited about it, and remind people that have wishlisted the game that they should come back and check it out now, and maybe now is the right time to buy that game that they were curious about earlier. So if you're using those visibility rounds in that way with major updates to your game, I think you can reach out through our support system and ask for another visibility round, and we'll take a look at your game. And if it looks like you're using them for that purpose, then we're happy to grant some more visibility rounds. If you're using them just to communicate small bits of news and that's not the way the feature was intended to be used, then once you've used your 5, you're done.
All right. Well, let's tackle this question before we move on to some of the ones that we got in beforehand. We had an anonymous attendee ask about privacy. Specifically, there are tools like Steam Spy and other things that developers can use to do marketing research. And does Steam have any plans to implement things like that? I am doing a very poor job of summarizing what this question is. It's stuff like that. And I'll answer the first part of it, which is, like, how does Steam view privacy, and how are our websites like Steam Spy getting that kind of information? So one, we are very protective of your data because we think it's your data. It's not for anyone else. So we do our best to make sure that anything that should be exclusive to you and your partner account stays that way. That being said, we have a bunch of things for customer use, like top seller charts and, upcoming, popular upcoming games. And, there are ways to take a look at that and do your best guess to get things. What does Steam Spy have? I think they have like user license user. Anyways, as you can tell, I'm not really familiar with that website, but you're always going to be able to pull some kind of estimate just because we expose some of that information to customers in terms of what's selling well and what's really interesting to upcoming users, or what upcoming games are interesting to users. But we're never, explicitly sharing that information with someone who's not you.
Yeah, if you as a game developer are trying to conduct some general marketing research and figure out what games are popular, what are popular games doing, there's some interesting ways you can get at that just by browsing around Steam. So if you're making a particular kind of game, and you're making a puzzle platformer game, you can dive into the puzzle platformer section of Steam and you can see what are the top selling games in that genre? What are the kinds of things that they're doing in their game that you can kind of learn from and see that they're doing well and that are maybe the cause of their success. Some of those things are really hard to tell what is actually the cause of success. There's so many variables and different attributes that go into making a game. Sometimes it can be really hard to tell or pin down what is making a particular game successful. But you can get at some general ideas by how do they present their artwork? How do they talk about their game? What kind of features does their game have? What are the unique, interesting attributes of that game? So, just looking around and trying to learn what you can from who are the popular games in the kind of genre or theme that you are creating. And then again, you can look at also top selling games and get a sense of, well, what are the best games on the platform? What are they doing? What kind of genres are they in? What kind of things are they doing in the game? What style of game? What kind of art? How do they talk about their games? Those are all ways that you can learn a lot about how you might conduct your presence on Steam as well.
And then the last part of the question was, are there any plans from Steam to implement some kind of tool to help developers in marketing research? And I think the answer for now is going to be no. Again, we're not, we don't like to share other people's information. We don't like to share your information. And I don't think I guess no is just the answer. I don't know that there's like more to say about it, sorry. No, but you can always do marketing research on Steam. We're never going to, take away your ability to browse around the store, so.
Yeah, and there's a number of people and companies that try to conduct their own market research and offer some insights based on information they've either scraped from website, from the public information that we have accessible, or that they've gathered from talking to game developers. So it's useful to kind of do some research as well and learn what you can from those people that might have some data, but also be thoughtful in how you interpret their data. If they are trying to conduct analysis with only a few data points, it may not be as helpful as they're trying to make it seem. Ultimately, it's probably the most useful to make the kind of game that you're most excited to make, because that is going to reflect well among your customers. They're going to pick up on that excitement. And if you're trying to find a particular genre or a particular niche to build a game in, and you're not as familiar with that genre or niche, it's going to be a lot harder to build a game to really nail that niche or that genre. So it's probably best served to go with what you're excited about and build something really exciting and unique and different in that space. And that, I think, customers will pick up on that excitement.
All right, back to some of the questions that were submitted ahead of time. Alden, do we plan on implementing a real-time online service for matchmaking or other purposes?
Yeah, and if you have more clarity on this question, we might be able to give a more detailed answer. Steamworks does have some features built in for matchmaking. They work only with other players that are also on Steam, but we definitely have a suite of tools that you can make use of there for matchmaking. But if you want to build or have a matchmaking system that works across different platforms, you'll probably have to use a third-party vendor or build your own kind of networking for that thing. We do have a very open network traffic API that you can make use of, which means even if you build your own networking or matchmaking system, you can use our network backbone to be able to send your multiplayer traffic over. And that can be really, really beneficial for limiting latency and making sure that it's getting through to customers regardless of where they are and what their internet provider is. So if you take a look in our documentation, I don't have that super handy. I'll see if I can look that up while we're talking through other questions here.
I got that. You can keep going.
Okay, well, that was the end of that answer, I believe. So I'll look that up. There was another question that came in chat, but also I think variations on that came in ahead of time, really kind of wondering, how through the review process and in general, what do we ship on Steam? What kind of things do we not allow to ship on Steam? And maybe you've heard stories about certain games being banned from releasing on Steam. So maybe some concern around that. So I'll talk about that really quick. We are in the business of shipping games. And so, as much as possible, we want to see every game that adheres to law be able to release on Steam. So we're not going out of our way to try to find reasons to ban games or prevent games from releasing. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We're trying to make sure that games that adhere to various laws are able to release. So we're based in the United States. We have a certain set of laws that we have to be held to. And so we're mostly evaluating games to make sure that they adhere to those local laws and that we're not going to get in trouble by releasing these games on our platform. So as you're signing up to distribute games on Steam, there's a pretty clear list of things to watch out for. And that includes, some of the things are, just paying attention to what things are legal and not legal, especially in the United States, but also in other countries. So there's certainly games that we ship that are not allowed in Germany. And then we simply have that game not listed for sale in Germany. So if you know that your game violates laws in certain countries, please reach out to us and let us know that as part of submitting your game for release, and we can take a look at it through that lens. And then also, if you think that we've made a mistake and that we've incorrectly reviewed your game, we're always happy to re-review or reconsider. It's a group of humans, again, as I said earlier, looking through these things. So sometimes we make mistakes. We try to do our best in evaluating and making sure that the things that we're releasing on Steam are lawful. Did that answer those questions, Ria?
That was, I think, the one that we had in Q&A and also the ones that were submitted beforehand. So I'll move on to the very last question that we had submitted ahead of time, and we're also done with all of the questions in Q&A. We have 8 minutes left, so if you have any questions, be sure to get those in before I stop talking. But before that, we had one last question, which was, is Steam interested to know about projects that are being developed by Peruvian studios? Unlike other countries in the region, Peru does not have a market or ambitious project. What could you tell the Peruvian video game or multimedia industry to encourage them to have more initiatives? So this one is a multifaceted question, so I'll answer the first one. Do we want to know about projects that are being developed by Peruvian studios? You're always welcome to tell us what's going on, but functionally remember that we are the platform, and so we are the very end of that journey most of the time. If you are working on a game fund or if you are doing a game jam, these are things that we tend to not engage with very much because it is very far away from when it is going to come onto Steam. You're always welcome to tell us about it. If you're running a Games in Peru sale, we have a place on Steam for you to talk about your Games from Peru sale. And so we're always happy to hear what's going on in your world and what projects you guys are working on, but just functionally remember that we are when you are ready to ship. So sometimes there are really cool things that are going on that we can't really help with. And that's just how it goes. And then finally, the second part of the question where, is there something that we would want to tell the Peruvian video game or multimedia industry? We're not experts at that. So I encourage you to, if you're interested in things like that, reach out to other regional video game or industry groups. There are a ton of them. There's a group that, does French games. There's a group that does Quebec games, and they might have better advice in terms of, what can really galvanize your industry or what kind of activity is helpful to up and coming developers and all that. We don't really know very much about doing that, so we encourage you to reach out to the folks that do.
Hitoshi dropped another question in. Do tags in the Steam page help developers be discovered by the right audience? Is there any way to validate my tags are done correctly? So I can talk a little bit about that. Tags are little bits of metadata that you attach to your store page. Both you as developers can do that, and then customers can also attach tags to your store page. And we find that that's helpful because sometimes your audience knows your genre really, really well, and they might have important nuances about your game that are useful to describe to other customers. In general, we try to make the tag system such that you as a game developer should apply the tags that make sense and are relevant to your game, so they accurately describe the style, the theme, the genres, the visual point of view, the visual styles about your game. And then Steam uses that to match it up with other games that also have those attributes. So like many things on Steam, we try not to make special secret hidden gotchas or things that you might trip over. We try to make it a pretty straightforward, simple system. You apply the tags that make sense for your game, and Steam will use that to recommend your game to other games that have those kinds of tags to them. So you can imagine you could try to manipulate that system by applying a bunch of popular tags to your store page. And if those things are totally wrong, you'll end up with a bunch of confused customers on your store page, and that's not likely to help you a whole lot. So really the best results will be to do the best that you can to accurately tag your game in the way with all the tags that make sense and apply to your game and the kind of game you're making.
And then
We've got-
there's one
yeah,
last
go
thing
ahead.
about that. When you do your tags, it can often be helpful to, after giving the system some time to ingest that, go check what's showing up in more games like this. If the games that are showing up in more games like this are completely irrelevant to your game and are not similar at all, you might want to take another look at your tags, because that can often be a sign that you don't have the right tag combination or you don't have them set in the same, like in the right order. So I think it's just a good way to gut check, because if you're getting way irrelevant games in that section, you might want to double check your tags.
Yeah, and the exact right order doesn't matter that much. You should generally have the tags that apply to larger portions of your game should be higher up in your list of tags, and the things that describe minor components of your game should be farther down in the list of your tags. But I wouldn't sweat over whether a certain tag is position 9 or position 10. Steam doesn't care about the difference between that nuance.
Although
we've got
the first 15 tags matter more than the last 5. That's not all locations on the store use the first 20. Some of them use the first 15. So I would just go ahead and make sure that the first 15 contain all of the really important ones. But I would hope that would be the case anyways, because when we're getting to like 16 through 20, we're getting pretty niche at that point, I think.
Yeah, that's right. We've got 2 minutes left, so I think we'll start wrapping up here. And Paulo submitted a question that says, thank you. Be kind in your answers, you rock. Thank you. Thank you, Paulo. Really appreciate that. We appreciate all your thoughtful questions. We think there's always one helpful point that we like to make at the end of this, which is we are always available to get in contact with. Ria even dropped a link into the chat, which is our ticketing system that Ria has talked about extensively at the beginning of this. That helps get routed to people all over the business team. Questions even get routed to me when it applies to things that I can help out with. So don't hesitate to drop communication into there, whether you have a technical question or you're looking for advice or you have a support issue, you need help with something, please use that to contact us.
Yeah.
And with that, thank you all for joining us. We hope this has been a productive and helpful hour with you all. We really appreciate you being here and asking good questions. And thank you to Diego for helping pull this all together.
All right, well, that is it from us here in Seattle. Thanks again for your time, and hopefully we'll hear from you soon.
All right, have a good evening, everyone.